Hi, folks. I want to share today something with you. Let's get started. It's quite an interesting topic. I was thinking that I could come up with a cursor, that I don't need to model the services in NSO. To be honest, my question was really, with all the tools and cursor and uh, Anthropic with Claude, all that capability is not today. And given that the frontier models are so good, they can read your uh, RESTconf APIs and use it like acrobatic. You can directly order anything it will be served on the plate. So given that uh, huge change in automation, do you still need automation software like NSO? Okay, I was really questioning about this. Um, so excuse me. I would really like to go through this small video that I was playing with. Might give you some answers on this. Okay, so let's start it. My lab is still NSO, and I have three devices. The three devices are real devices. Well, still kind of virtual Nokia lab that I did last time. In this case, I deployed three routers. They are real and they are up and running. The R2 is a reflector in my BGP setup, and you see those simulators. These are simulators. They're not real devices, even though they are virtual, but they are not really. You cannot ping. You cannot. It's isolated just for configuration exercise devices. Okay, it's NetSim under NSO, and this guy is just outlier. I don't use it. So what I did is that R1, R3 are the reflector client, and R2 is reflector, and I modeled those BGP configuration in NSO service model. The service model basically will able to deploy your reflector, okay, or deploy any reflector client. So setting up the BGP sessions for the reflector and client, okay, both sides. So with this service model, you can just set up BGP peering between the reflector and reflector client. This is what I did. So I was asking the cursor, the model to check the config. Okay, so first I asked which router are configured today, if they are in sync, if they are synchronized with the NSO. Okay, this is what the status. But these three guys doesn't support that capability because they are using NetConf. So then I ask, for this device, I want to see the BGP config. Okay, so this is BGP config. It's a client. You see it's a very simple, just a BGP reflector client. And this is the RESTconf config. Okay, and what the parameters been set in for this client. So AS and its neighbor, its router ID, BGP AS. Okay. Then I said, could show me the relevant service model which provision this config and its required input parameters. So when you provision the service model, what parameter you need to put in to become up with this config. So then cursor went in and pulled out the YAML model and told me this. So basically I have two service packages. One is to set up the reflector itself, and then one is to set up the client. Okay, because this one need to exist before you can provision the reflector and client relationship. Of course, you can model this completely differently, but just this is what I just did quick and dirty. Then this is the basically in the service model what you need to input. What the service model is gonna model the config. You see, this part are just reflector and this part is the client. Okay, is gonna go in and for whatever a number of client you have, it will just deploy those. Okay. Then this is what parameter I need to input to be able to provision this model. Okay. So not much. It's just those parameters which I just showed you on his config. Okay. Then we'll this is the service model, and this is its corresponding template. If you're familiar with Sensor, you know that you always have a YAML model that describes the service. Basically, the parameters what you need to put in to provision a service. Service is just a bunch of parameters that you define as a service. So this service is basically peering, BGP root reflector and its client peering, and modeled as a service. Okay, as a complete bunch of network works that you need to do as a whole service. Okay, then this is the template. Basically, this is the mapping into the real config represented in XML. So this is on the client side. On the NetSim side, what the real config looks like. This is a XML representation. Okay. And those are the service leaves. This is the minimum input. Then I was challenging the cursor, saying, okay, well, if I want to change the BGP AS of this whole setup, what would change on those service models? And he says, okay, well, he didn't model it today because these are set by default. So you see, this number will be set by default. Okay, no parameter input. You see here that I don't input anything in AS. Okay, so minimum to operate provided minimum. There's no BGP AS to be inputted because it's done by default. Assume that you always take 65000. Okay, well then that's okay. If I want to change, what does that mean? He says today there's no separate client AS. AS is single shared IBGP number. Okay, wow. Yeah, so it's copied at creation time. Okay. So what does that mean? Then it's a template by. Okay, scenario one, you changed AS for everyone. So if you change 6500 to 65, and there's also no design changes. So by IBGP, that doesn't need to change the service model. So then it's probably easy that you just need to change the service model, and just need to change that our ASN, and that will do. Okay, then we will change those MCP servers. By the way, all these service models are built as a part of the MCP tools here. So if you see my MCP server, then you would see, oh God, 147 tools. Hardly to find it. I assume it's one of them. Okay, then it will just change the MCP, find the tool, basically this one, and change the AS number, and we're done. Okay. So I see change RR via this particular Python function, change it to this, then reput each client. So RR is refreshed. Yeah, that's straightforward. If you want to change AS completely on the client side, not on the RAWFlex side, then we have to remodel this whole thing, because then it changes to BGP, eBGP configuration, and you need a complete design change. That means you need to prompt Cursor to remodel this to a different setup. That's a bigger effort. Then you only want to change the client side. It will be similar to scenario A, I think. It's okay. Okay, well, I don't consider scenario C at all. Anyways, so I said, okay, if I don't, so here is coming back to my original question. Okay, for this kind of change, if I don't use NSO service model, what would you do to make this kind of change? Highlight what is the impact on token consumption. Okay, token consumption becomes not a problem, but I think in long run, once we are so used to Claude Code and a large language model, we depend on the frontier model so much, and we don't care about the cost. Actually, I do care, because I know that people I heard from, for example, Llama Index. Jerry's his company engineers are overly consumed. They are like, they are like burning the token as the pay rate almost. Okay, each engineer are doubling its cost from pay grade to for his payroll to the maximum of token consumption. So I do think token consumption will later on become a cost factor. At the moment, maybe not. You think that tokens are cheap, but once you start to don't even care about how much token you consume, it will probably eventually become a problem. And this is the question now. So if I don't use this kind of MCP tools, or let's say service model that are modeled in a automation software, what would be the difference? If I don't use MCP, I don't use NSO, I just use a plain tools like REST API and CLI, all that tools, what will be the impact? So here's the answer. Here's a practical split, service model versus no service model, with emphasis on agent token cost, turns times context size, not dollar math. No real dollar behind it, but we just see how much costs, how much turns, how much tokens we're gonna burn. Then it's just okay. So the different paths you can choose. You can use NSO RESTconf, okay, because I have given Cursor all the RESTconf APIs that it could understand and use. Just pull out the API and do the work. Then you have NSO CLI, because NSO does also have a CLI tool, just like iOS CLI, Juniper CLI, whatever. You can configure devices using CLI, okay? But I wouldn't recommend that. Then you have an orchestration script. You just use Python bash to wrap around RESTconf, but still automated. And you can, of course, go to the device directly and you just configure it using a CLI. Show and configure. You can do that as well. But I really don't want to do that, maybe. Okay. Then here you say, this is example, change BGPs. What does that mean? If you use service model, then you would change one script, one MCP call, set up the RR client services, 7 client, 7 MCP calls. Okay. Of course, sometimes you need to synchronize the devices on NSO to check if these devices still are synced up with config, and this is ncalls. You have to do actually before you're setting up things, right? So this is the so agent context per call, small JSON in, small JSON out. No ISSR versus SRL in the chat. Okay. Yeah. And function wins. One intent map to RR plus client. Template encodes vendor branches. DD service just roll back that peer. Okay. You just delete that thing. Without service model, you would list the devices or remember the inventory, get R2, BGP subtree is a pretty large JSON. You will get also the simulator, the iOS XR YARN. You get Nokia YARN, SSL YARN, and get all of them in repeat. Then patch each leaf, okay? And you will patch R2 as a reflector, and you check sync, fix drift, retry on run pass. Okay, so I think you already see what's the difference between using MCP, using NSO, and using RESTconf. Okay, and I think this will be the same if you go to device RESTconf instead of NSO's RESTconf. You can of course just call the devices directly. Yeah. And here is the token cost versus function. Okay, you see that the turn is much higher than using MCP. The conclusion is 3 and 5 times fewer agents cost. I think when it scales to larger networks, consider hundreds, 200,000 devices, the cost is substantial. Okay, so basically that's what I want to see, want to show. Stay tuned for the next one. For the next thing, you can call out what I could demo the functionalities to you. I mean, the service model is pretty clear. You deploy it, a service model, you can do the complete CRUD circle, create, read, update, and delete. All that is done on NSO software itself. And what you need to take care using Cursor and Cloth Code is just to model it.